Danusia here. Welcome to Parents Who Think. Today, I'm chatting with author Uju Asika. Uju shares her personal experiences with childhood racism in her book called Bringing Up Race: How to Raise a Kind Child in a Prejudiced World. I'm so looking forward to hearing about her journey, the importance of healing, and the hope she finds in the next generation. She also wrote children's picture book A World for Me and You, and her latest, Raising Boys Who Do Better. Here we are, talking about bringing up race.
I've cried writing the book. I've cried listening to people's stories, sharing my own story. But at the same time, I think I gained a lot of hope from writing the book. And I think that's kind of what I want to pass on through the book is hope.
What was it that you cried about, and what did writing this book raise in you?
It raised a lot of memories and a lot of sadness for some of the experiences I had as a young girl. So I was born in Nigeria, and then I came to the UK and I went to boarding school when I was very young, about 7 going on 8. And I joined my brother and sister who were already at this boarding school, and it was very white boarding school. And we were literally maybe 4 Black people in the entire school. So writing the book and recalling my memories of the racist experiences that I had, being called the N-word, being told, everything from I was dirty to how strange my hair was, all of that. And I think for me, looking back on that little girl that I was and thinking, what I had to shoulder at that age, I think that was always quite painful.
Yeah, it sounds like recovering those memories was in some ways cathartic, but you had to go through that pain to actually really be connected and then to bring this forward for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's because it's kind of an ongoing pain. So even though I'm, I don't think of myself as a person in pain, a sort of cheerful, bubbly person, but the fact of racism and the fact that it continues and continued to the point where I shared stories of my children going through racist incidents, that is really painful. This is like a real deep wound in our society that hasn't properly been addressed.
What does your research show about when children start noticing ethnic differences?
The studies that I read when I wrote the book was babies from 3 months old show signs of scanning faces differently, depending on whether it's somebody belonging to their own race or somebody belonging to a different race. So they're already picking up on the fact that there's something about this other person that doesn't fit in with my familiar environment. Mm-hmm. But the important thing to note as well is at that age, they don't really show any kind of bias towards any race. They're just noticing it, as opposed to when they get to around 9 that babies start to show, just a subtle reactions to other ethnicities. And then it's from around age 2 to 3 that kids start to actively show in-group and out-group favoritism. So kids do pick up difference, and they do, when they're much younger than you might expect, start to react and respond to difference, and often can be quite negative around difference. And you can't put this as sort of something to blame kids for, because realistically, they're picking up so much from society, and it starts to sort of slowly indoctrinate them into, who matters more, who belongs where, who lives where, who earns what, who counts, So yeah, it's quite interesting research.
It is fascinating. So I'm assuming that by the time they get to 2 and 3, our children, that things like what they've been exposed to on television or books, or the kinds of stories that we've read to them, or the actual people in their lives.
Yes.
The diversity or the lack of diversity or the kind of diversity that will be present in their lives will be seeping into their consciousness that it's just there, isn't it? It's like it's not designed, but it will form almost the framework of their thinking and their life.
Yes. You see, this is the shift that's happening now, because a lot of parents of my generation certainly grew up thinking, oh, we should be colorblind and we should not talk about race. And that is how we're going to create a very fair and equal society, because we're just going to absorb everybody into the same kind of, raceless existence.
Yeah, assimilate everybody.
Yeah, just assimilate everybody. But all of this sort of, I don't know, well-intentioned, but it's a lie. And for children, it's a real disconnect between what they can see and what they absorb, and then what they're allowed to talk about, or what they're allowed to say, or what they're allowed to open up about. So I think now, especially with all that's gone on, it's allowing us to have these conversations, allowing children to be able to articulate that, oh yeah, there are differences and I see them, and what is this about? And can I ask a question about it? And, where do we go from here?
So how do we have open, honest, age-appropriate conversations with our children about race? How do we start?
Yeah, this is one that lots of parents ask me, because I think everyone is really scared of getting it wrong. The way you'd open up any conversation, ask your child, depending on their age, if they're really young, you can talk about stuff that they might have observed, or use the resources available to you. Like you might have a picture book. So you can talk openly about skin color differences, about different features, different languages. What does difference mean? What does difference mean to you? As your kids are older, you can ask them what they know about race, what they've learned at school, perhaps. Do they talk about race beyond Black History Months? How can you sort of supplement their learning at home? So I think when you're having conversations with race, just keep it simple, keep it age appropriate, and, just remember that you're going to have more conversations. And if there's something that you don't know personally, then just say, oh, I don't know. Shall we find out together? Or let me look it up and I'll see, or let's continue this conversation later. So, I think the main thing is just to have the conversations for it.
And for those of us that feel utterly out of a depth in terms of our own understanding, how do we equip ourselves to not sit saying, gosh, I really don't know any answer to anything, because we've got to start from somewhere. So where would you point listeners?
So there's so many things you can do, but I would say the first thing is that shift in consciousness. The second thing is really using the resources that are available there, actually spending time with the resources, not just sort of like a checklisting, but, reading it again, having discussions around it. I think a lot of people were starting anti-racist book clubs, which I think is a really good idea, because it makes you sort of really consider the topic from all sorts of angles, and you can have these conversations in spaces where you feel more comfortable, to share openly, so that you're not always feeling like you're on the defensive, or, you're going to be attacked for saying the wrong thing or not coming with the right approach.
Yeah, like it's a loving interrogation of our own past, as well as, our current life, and how I am raising my children, what kinds of conversations I'm having, or friends, who's in our close circle, who are in my company, who we hire, those kinds of things. And really doing it, and why I said lovingly interrogate. It's like lovingly do that, lovingly look, because it is what it is. And it's about raising consciousness and wanting a new way, isn't it? So it is that criticality, but from a loving stance. And that's the same as we develop our awareness with our children, to kind of embrace this learning mode with our kids. That's how I'm doing it.
I think that sounds great. I absolutely love what you've said about lovingly interrogate your whole life, really, which is what, it's like a self-audit, but Sometimes when you think of an audit, it sounds really hard and grueling. But actually, if you come at it with a loving and a critical approach, then you're inevitably going to raise that consciousness. And one of the things I talk about in the book is about how critical thinking, I think, is really linked to kindness. I think if there was anything such as like a kindness curriculum, I think that critical thinking would be central to it because it really is, like you said, about consciousness. It's about being able to think beyond a particular space or your particular situation or yourself as an individual, being able to look beyond yourself, being properly, actively inclusive. And I think giving children the chance to consider, to sort of problem solve their way out of situations where they might feel afraid or where they might feel like they don't belong, like allow them to think beyond that, to keep expanding their thinking. And there's that expansiveness that will allow everyone to really sort of raise our consciousness as a society. And really, when you think about it, race is actually a fictional idea. It doesn't really exist. That's the science on race shows that it's just something that was created as a system to oppress and to control and to basically for an economic advantage. But at the same time, when you look at all of us from all our different backgrounds and ethnicities and experiences, it's so fascinating. It's such an interesting and potentially really positive and quite joyful story of humanity. But, I think it's a real shame that we are still stuck in a very negative and backwards way of looking at difference. So, yeah.
And we started with hope, Uju. We started with you talking about how, despite this being a reminder of so many memories and a surfacing of so many memories for you personally, and the tears that brought, and the sadness for that little girl that had to go through that. Actually, you also came out of this book writing and this publishing your wonderful book with hope. So what do you see as possible?
I see as possible the fact that each generation, I do feel they are becoming a lot more conscious, a lot more open to different ways of being, different forms of identity. They're a lot more vocal. They're much more willing to take charge of situations where they feel like things can change. Look at all the Black Lives Matter campaigning and then the climate change campaigning, and all of these are real youth-led movements.
Yes.
So I feel a lot of hope for the future, and I'm really hopeful that more people will get involved and will continue to raise their children in the right way.
And your book is such an important part of that. It really is. So thank you. I know it's going to help so many of my listeners in their commitment to a better world. And thank you for coming on this podcast to bring your words to so many people. I'm so grateful to you.
I'm so grateful to you. Thanks for having me.
Uju's book is a fantastic resource for understanding, healing, and sparking vital conversations about race and inclusion. I was struck by Uju's resilience and her belief in the power of young people to create a better future. I hope our conversation was meaningful for you too. Till next time, keep thinking and loving. Take care, everyone.